Okay, so you know the JFK assassination.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that, like, just sticks with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Decades later, and we're still like, what happened?
Right.
So many questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then just recently, we saw another, like, huge dump of classified documents connected to the case.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but I'm always trying to kind of, like, cut through the noise and figure out what's actually important. Like, what does this new information actually tell us?
Yeah.
And so that is exactly what we are doing right now.
That's our deep dive today.
We are taking a deep dive.
Absolutely.
We've gone through all of the news coverage.
Yeah.
We listened to this really great in-depth historical analysis.
Little good.
Just to, like, bring you the crucial details from this latest document release.
Yes.
And our aim here is to really understand, like, what these newly public files are telling us.
Right.
And explore the different ways that people are interpreting this still unfolding chapter in history.
One of the things that's so interesting is that, we had that executive order back on January 23rd of 2025.
Right.
And, this wasn't something that just kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
President Trump signed this order to declassify every single classified document related to the assassinations of JFK, or RFK, and MLK.
It's a huge deal.
It is.
And, the goal there was just to respond to the public desire for transparency on these pivotal events in American history.
Yeah, and then we had, that big day, March 18th.
Oh, yeah.
Over 80,000 files released.
80,000.
It's incredible.
It's crazy.
And most of them were linked to the Warren Commission's investigation from 1964.
Right, the one that concluded that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone.
Right.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting for anyone trying to, like, piece this puzzle together.
Yeah.
There are just thousands of pages with really specific details about Oswald and the world that he lived in. We're talking about, his attempts to secure a Soviet visa,
right,
his contacts with the Soviet embassy,
right,
and even stuff about the activities of the intelligence community in the 1960s.
Yeah, and just to be clear for our listeners, we're talking about, like the CIA,
right,
and the FBI.
Yeah.
Those types of folks.
Those guys.
And, you have to think about anyone trying to figure out Oswald's motivations.
Right.
Were there other forces at play here?
Yeah.
These kinds of specifics are just so valuable.
Yeah, and one detail that emerged was actually like a previously overlooked exchange between Oswald and a known KGB operative.
Really?
Just weeks before the assassination.
Wow.
And it just raises these questions about, potential connections.
Right.
Now, it doesn't really establish anything definitive.
Of course.
But it's like, whoa, okay.
That's a really good point.
So you've got this information that's coming out.
Right.
And the reactions have been,
oh my God,
all over the place.
They've been so diverse.
Which,
It makes sense, though, right?
It makes sense.
It's a really sensitive topic.
Yeah.
A lot of debate surrounding it.
Yeah.
So on one hand, you've got, some historians and researchers who are cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, I think I fall into that camp.
I do too.
I'm like, yeah, there's probably not going to be one thing that's like, here it is, the smoking gun.
Right. But all this detail,
so much detail,
could lead to a more nuanced understanding
of
the circumstances surrounding the assassination.
Absolutely. And these files also shed light on some of the surveillance programs that were targeting individuals with suspected communist ties.
Right.
Which just gives you a glimpse into, like, the Cold War paranoia.
Absolutely.
Of the era.
Yeah.
So you've got the historical community kind of, like, excited to delve into these details.
Yeah.
But then you have the Kennedy family.
Right.
And they had a very different reaction.
Understandably so.
Jack Schlossberg, President Kennedy's grandson, has voiced some significant criticism.
Oh, yeah.
He reportedly feels that the administration used his grandfather's legacy for political purposes.
Interesting.
And he was also disappointed that the Kennedy family wasn't informed in advance of the release of these documents.
Yeah.
It's a family matter.
Yeah, it brings in the personal dimension of it.
For sure.
Like, these aren't just historical artifacts. This is part of a family's lived history.
Absolutely. And it's not over when it comes to transparency.
Right.
There are people who want more information to be made public.
Right.
The House Oversight Committee, led by Representative Anna Paulina Luna, has actually established a whole task force on the declassification of federal secrets.
So there is a real commitment in some parts of the government to continue this process.
I think so.
Of releasing historical records.
Absolutely.
Which leads us to the whole thing about conspiracy theories.
Right. It's like they're never going to go away. they're not going away,
Right.
even with this new information.
So much new information.
All these alternative explanations haven't disappeared.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the documents do touch on some of the key elements that fuel these theories.
Right.
Like the perceived communist threat from Cuba,
Yeah.
Oswald's connection to Moscow,
Of course.
espionage activities during the Cold War.
It's all in there.
It's all in there.
And it's fascinating because while these files will give us like a more detailed picture,
Yeah.
it's unlikely they'll offer any conclusive proof
Right.
for those who subscribe to certain conspiracy theories.
You're going to keep looking.
They're going to keep looking.
And the National Archives and Records Administration, NRA,
Yeah.
is still expediting the release of any remaining files.
They are?
And recently, the FBI uncovered an additional 2,400 records related to the assassination,
Wow.
which are being processed and will be released at a later date.
It just keeps going,
It just keeps going.
doesn't it?
And it really emphasizes that our understanding of this continues to evolve.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to the Kennedy family's perspective for a moment,
Right.
because Jack Schlossberg's concerns highlight another part of this whole document release.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about how he's worried about, this focus on the specifics of his grandfather's death
Yeah.
and how it might fuel what he sees as unfounded conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
But his main concern is that it takes away
Yeah.
from his grandfather's achievements
Yeah.
and legacy as president.
He wants people to remember.
He wants the emphasis to be
Mhm.
on
Yeah.
what his grandfather accomplished for the nation.
And not just the tragic circumstances
Right.
of his assassination.
It's easy to get lost in the details,
Yeah.
but it is really personal history for that family.
It is.
This raises the question about how we as a society
Yeah.
grapple with these huge historical events.
Right.
There's a public interest in understanding the past,
Yeah.
especially events with such huge implications.
Absolutely.
But there is also the impact on the families involved
Of course.
and, sensitive information being interpreted in ways that are damaging
Right.
or misleading.
Absolutely.
Given the Warren Commission's stance,
Yeah.
what kind of evidence in these documents
Right.
would cause historians to reconsider that conclusion?
Is there any?
Even if it's not a smoking gun, is there
Right.
anything in there
Right.
that would
Yeah.
make them say,
Yeah.
maybe we need to rethink this?
Right.
So to kind of sum it all up,
Yeah.
we've seen this huge release
Mm-hmm.
of documents related to the JFK assassination,
Yeah.
with the majority connected to the Warren Commission's findings.
Right.
And they provide more detail on Oswald's background.
Right.
The geopolitical landscape of the time,
Mm-hmm.
really valuable for researchers.
It is.
We've also seen a
Yeah.
whole bunch of reactions,
Yeah.
ranging from cautious optimism from historians
Yeah.
to, the disappointment from the Kennedy family. And the push for further information continues,
Hopefully.
along with the alternative theory.
Conspiracy theories.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
This declassification was a big step towards making historical information accessible.
Mm-hmm.
But it really brings up some complex questions
Yeah.
about the public's right to know,
Right.
balanced with
Yeah.
the potential consequences for the legacies of individuals and families.
Connected to these events,
Yeah.
as you consider these newly released details and the diverse perspectives around them,
Mm-hmm.
what do you think is the most crucial aspect
Right.
of understanding this historical event?
That's a question.
And how does this release of information
Yeah,
ultimately shape that understanding for you?
that's something to think about.
It is a lot to think about.
It is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.